copy from somebody else. But anyhow, what they did, perhaps they changed the original leather band. Well, I mean, this is kind of a very old leather band, but perhaps it was not the actual first one. You know what I mean? Like, you got the hat leathers in 1877. Because this is from, I would say, 1875 to 1880, most likely. I have re-revised it since, and I still have not changed my opinion. It is certainly not, in my opinion, from after 1890. So this is very, very old. But let us say he got it in 76, and this was replaced by a new one in 77. Right now I have no way of knowing that. But what I can know for sure is that whichever, they did remove it and added what one calls, I forgot what they call this, a special term in hatting, when actually it's a desire to make the hat smaller. But when instead of sticking it there, like with the cap brand new, that Kevin, this is a modern thing that you stick on there, that is, I know from hats and guitars. Instead, they will do it from below. So what they might do is, see with this, they might put paper, they often put newspaper things there to make the hat smaller or fit better to the head shape, the time. Because some people will not sweat a lot, so it would never really conform. So instead of conforming it, they would simply, you know, this hat was not made for them or not the exact size, that they would put things especially on the sides to fill in that space on the side. And this is true of any hat, especially stiff hats, and not necessarily these types of hats, not necessarily gossamer hats or silk hats or whatever. Squarelers, like I call them squarelers, I call top hats squarelers. Anyhow, what they did there is they stuck it. It was actually glued. So now some cheaper hats were glued. Anyhow, this has not been sewn in. This is a false stitching. Just at the back there. It's just to really cut the head more nicely and perhaps to look nicer. Probably for both purposes. Now, it is possible, because this hat is a special quality. So normally with special quality hats, they would sew them, at least with Anglo-Saxon ones and even any ones. Because the silk is very good, and especially before glossing it, I could tell the silk was very dense and very good, like that one, if not actually better, because there it does not have special quality, so perhaps it meant it was some of the highest quality silk. So for a special quality silk top hat, made with a very nice shape, I doubt they would have actually glued it. What probably happened was, as I said, perhaps it was passed on to another member of the family or whatever, and it did not fit him right, so he took it to perhaps a cheaper local leader, hatter, and they kind of did a cheap job, but essentially they could not really do better than that, because if he, perhaps he tried, perhaps the thing, this is even perhaps the original headband, who knows, and it was like that, and it was flexible, because this is clearly pure leather, and if anything, even perhaps better quality than this, or at least as good as quality as that, and this is still very good quality, especially compared to, obviously, modern day post-1970, shabby, humbugy standards. This is very good quality leather, so this would have been sold in, but he might have wanted it smaller. He might, you know, the paper thing, I did try it with this hat, which is way too big. It's very hard to compare, because this is much bigger than what I need. It's much, this is a 56.5, this is in centimeters, this is the circumference. The circumference here, not the circumference of where the headband itself, which has been, you know, made smaller with the wool here and put higher up in the head. But this is a 50 and this is a 60 at least. So I tried putting newspaper clippings in it, which just had my head. So let us say that there was the same difference between that chap and me compared to that hat. So he had basically a very small head. Let us say he had a 53 head and he still wanted to wear that hat. Or 54 head. What he did, the newspaper things will not really work. So what they clearly did, which I explained before, is they unstitched it. And probably they better changed them really, because I cannot really see what they unpacked the stitches, but it's possible that through the years, you know, it would kind of, the tiny holes would close again. And then they added this wool, and they glued it higher up, so basically it will have to well it. It will encourage him and force him to well it lower upon the head, because also notice that this hat goes, now I'm not an expert in shapes, I'm actually quite bad in all that is shapes and all, so it goes, the shape is not straight at all, it goes, you know, an hourglass somewhat. So basically my idea, that I may be wrong in terms of dimension, is because it goes like this, sorry, like that, from the inside, the more one moves up the leather up, the more it shall have a small fit. If he desires to wear it, the more it shall fit tightly, especially that they made the leather also tighter. What that does is that it does not protect this thing, unfortunately. The Gauss hammer, it is meant to be, even in better hats, and perhaps in that one actually, if it was a better hat, even the better ones, they actually often, what is called a lip lining. What they do, they kind of did it here a little bit there, but not very well. Like this is a lip lining right here. They tend it ever so slightly by, a few millimeters, so that the sweat does not directly touch. The idea is that the least amount of sweat touches anything other than the sweatband, the leather sweatband. But on the rest of the hat, they did not. They only added a reed. Now this one has no reed, which also means it conforms more quickly and more to your exact head shape. But it simultaneously protects it less from the sweat and so from deforming itself through time. So I'm trying to reconcile things. But later on, especially from the late 90s, probably from 1880 onwards, more and more hats, whether fragile 1-ply of Gauss hammer crown and 4-ply Gauss hammer brim, silk formal squares like these, or much sturdier Cambridge hats or derbies or whatever, they all start having reeds. Now there are different types of reeds. It is basically a metal sort of fishing hook thing that essentially keeps the shape of the hat. All the soft hats, the very soft ones that are popular, like the modern soft wool hats that have almost no stiffness to it, they all have reeds. Probably not all of them have reeds, or they used to at least, because otherwise they will not retain the head shape, or they will just collapse into themselves like an ugly pillow. Obviously with Gauss hammer hats, they will not put reeds initially, because as I said, it is very stiff anyhow. But they started doing it regardless as a sort of overkill thing, and because I don't want to tell you something wrong, but I'm trying to figure out why they would do that. That probably also perhaps to add protection to the head. Now, this, there are different ways of doing it. Often now how to do it, and since probably the 50s and all, is they actually cheat. It's like a Goodyear welted shoe, in that I don't want to touch that too much, but basically the reed is like on a piece of, it's like there's a piece of, not of paper, but like of some sort of fabric, cloth. And the reed is glued onto that on one side, you will see. And the other side, they just sort of glue it onto the hat directly, like on that hat would be the merino that itself is glued onto the Gauss hammer, for example. And then it has a reed below, it all comes into one, and then it comes into a sweatband built in the factory into a sweatband, and then they actually sew the sweatband is actually sewn to that glued reed. So essentially your sweatband is not sewn into your hat, which is the best manner of doing it, but it's actually sewn in to the reed, not even the reed, the welt, the sort of strip of cloth, very thin strip of cloth, which itself is glued onto the hat. So it's kind of like saying the hat is still glued, the sweatband is still glued onto the hat, so it is kind of a cheating way. But in those days, and still today, with some makers that usually do bespoke hats, and they clearly sewn in with very small stitches, you see? As I said, now even though that stitch them, very few do it at a high density. It's so nice. It barely shows these tiny little black stitches with a black thread, see? You can barely see, the camera is of bad quality. It's not really shown, but they did sew it there. All around, they sewed the leather directly. So you might say, how do they sew through Gauss hammer? I never really understood that. They don't sew through Gauss hammer. They actually sew through the merino wool. Is on the other side of the brim. So now in the older top hats, in some rich people's top hats that are very rare to find now, almost impossible to find, this would still be covered in Silk-Plush in those days. And so they would sew directly onto the Silk-Plush, not through, from what I understood, not through the actual Gauss hammer. Maybe they actually sew it through the Gauss hammer, but then I foresee it. But it seems like in this case it is actually sold on